Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something really exciting. Our goal is to move way, way beyond the textbook grammar you might be used to. You know, when you study English, you learn the vocabulary, the syntax, the literal meanings of words. But what actually happens when you step out into the real world? Well, suddenly people are saying things they don't literally mean, they're apologizing when they aren't actually sorry, and they're even insulting each other using perfectly polite words. That right there is the true art of the language. So today, we are decoding English to really understand its unspoken rules, the nuance, the tone, and the subtext. Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine an American student completely bombs a test. You might hear a very blunt, direct assessment, something like, "That student is dumb." But British English often takes a completely different route to arrive at that exact same destination. Instead of that harsh directness, a British person might say, "She's not the brightest bunny in the field." Now, this brilliantly illustrates the sheer power of subtext. By using a qualified positive, saying someone is not the brightest, to imply a negative, it creates an insult that is deeply polite, but let's be real, also incredibly passive-aggressive. Section 1. Hedging and softening language, the shields of English. To really get this, we need to look at how we protect ourselves in conversation. I like to think of this as learning about the shields of English. We literally use these vital linguistic tools every single day to navigate social friction, to handle polite disagreements, and honestly, just to avoid stepping on people's toes. Consider the massive difference between literal English and softened English. On the one hand, literal English might just state, "You're wrong." It's accurate, sure, but it's harsh. On the other hand, softened English approaches it a bit differently. No offense intended, but I think you've misunderstood the basic problem. This brilliantly illustrates how native speakers use softening phrases to make their message diplomatic and far less threatening. It gets the exact same point across, but it preserves the relationship.
A massive part of softening is this concept called hedging. Hedging is basically a word or phrase used to express ambiguity, probability, caution, or indecisiveness. In the linguistics world, we consider hedging a vital tool of epistemic modality. Now, that is just a fancy way of saying it allows speakers to signal caution rather than declaring full, aggressive certainty about a topic.
Let's look at how this plays out in the real world, specifically in professional settings. If you've ever dealt with a difficult coworker over email, you know for a fact that directness can cause an absolute disaster. It is absolutely crucial to build a bank of softening phrases. Starting your sentences with words like "actually" or "to be honest" acts as a buffer. It completely modifies your message so you sound diplomatic while navigating those really challenging workplace situations. Here is another incredible example of what we call evasive hedging. It's not the most practical idea, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. When expectations aren't met, or when you just need to reject someone's proposal, evasive hedging acts as your conversational shield. It allows you to politely dismiss an idea without triggering an immediate defensive reaction from the other person. But hey, hedging isn't just for tricky emails and casual chats. Let's switch gears over to formal academic writing. When you read academic papers, you will literally see hedging everywhere. Why? Because it helps the author distinguish established facts from their own new claims. Using tentative language makes the writer appear humble rather than arrogant or all-knowing. It actually builds a cooperative relationship between the writer and you, the reader. So the really crucial point here is how we build these layers, because you can actually stack them. You have double hedges, like "it seems likely that." You have treble hedges, "it seems reasonable to assume that." And you can even push it all the way to a quadruple hedge. "It would seem somewhat unlikely that." By combining these verbs and adjectives, authors very carefully construct a rational, interpersonal strategy to persuade their reader without ever sounding overly aggressive. All right, moving on to Section 2, mastering the tone shift. It's wild, but as humans, we actually learn to detect tonal shifts from infancy. Before we can even understand a single vocabulary word, we know exactly what a sharp shift in our mother's voice means. A tone shift is the stylistic means by which a speaker or writer conveys their attitude. But the logic here is vital. A tone shift is not just an emotional change. It is a complete transformation of the literal meaning of the words. How you say it entirely changes what you mean. So how do authors and speakers actually pull this off? Well, they use the 4 drivers of tone: diction, irony, figurative language, and perspective. By pulling these 4 levers, a communicator can construct one of the 9 basic tones, such as shifting from a highly formal tone down to a humorous tone, or pulling right back into a serious tone.
Let me actively demonstrate this vocal contrast for you, using the exact same sentence. Imagine waking up to beautiful sunshine. You're feeling wonderful. You'd say, "What a great day." Pure, joyful sincerity. Now imagine you are on your summer vacation in Spain. You step outside, and you are immediately caught in a massive, freezing thunderstorm. You look up at the sky and just deadpan, "What a great day." Exactly the same words, entirely different meaning. That is how tone completely flips the script.
Which brings us to Section 3, Navigating Sarcasm and Humor, the Swords of English. If hedging and softening are the shields of English, while sarcasm and humor are absolutely the swords. This is the main tool native speakers use to project confidence, to add humor to a situation, or to convey sharp mockery. Wait, was that supposed to be a compliment? Have you ever thought this? Because let me tell you, every single foreign language learner has agonized over this exact question after a confusing social interaction. Sarcasm can be incredibly difficult to grasp because it completely relies on reading between the lines. To help decode all of this, let's quickly categorize sarcasm into 4 distinct styles. We have self-deprecating sarcasm, which is used to make fun of yourself; deadpan, which uses super dry humor with a completely neutral face; brooding, which expresses deep frustration; and juvenile. Now, I want to add a quick warning here. Juvenile sarcasm is usually designed to mock someone else in a pretty condescending way. It can be quite hurtful, so you definitely want to navigate that one very carefully. Let's look at deadpan sarcasm in action. Imagine your friend Brian. Now, Brian is known for following every single rule. He never breaks the law. But today, as you're walking to class, he proudly announces that he jaywalked across the street. You look at him with a completely neutral face and just say, "You're a really daring man." By stripping all the emotion out of your voice, you create a prime example of mocking, deadpan sarcasm. Native speakers also absolutely love to mix sarcasm with common idioms. For example, take the phrase, "not the sharpest tool in the shed." Calling someone the sharpest tool in the shed is traditionally a massive compliment. But when you mix it with sarcasm, usually to describe an underperforming colleague, you completely invert the meaning. A phrase that sounds like a lovely compliment instantly becomes a devastating critique. Okay, Section 4, the power of rhetoric. Let's elevate this explainer to the artistic level. This is where fluent speakers combine tone, humor, and softening all at once, using advanced rhetorical devices. These are essentially your secret weapons for making language really engaging and impactful. First up is a brilliant device called litotes. It's an ironic figure of speech used to express an understatement by negating its contrary. Now, I know that sounds complex, but it is actually the ultimate tool for conveying subtext and subtle sarcasm through intentional negation. Let's look at exactly how it works. If someone asks how a book is, you could just directly say, "It's okay." But if you use litos, you'd say, "It's not the worst book in the world." Do you hear the difference there? And this brilliantly illustrates how the litos version carries an unspoken, mildly sarcastic judgment. It's an understatement that says so much more than the plain direct version. Next up is antiphrasis. Now, this is a subset of irony, where a sentence or phrase means the exact opposite of what it appears to say. Think of the incredibly common English idiom, "tell me about it." If someone says this to you, they don't actually want you to tell them a story. What they really mean is, "Don't tell me, I already know exactly what you're talking about." And finally, my personal favorite. Imagine you are incredibly excited, or maybe incredibly frustrated, and you yell, "That is fan-freaking-tastic!" This is called temesis. It's when you literally split a word right down the middle to insert an expletive or an emphasizing word for massive effect. It's famously used by chefs like Gordon Ramsay to inject high-energy emotion directly into the center of a word. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative question to chew on. Are you just speaking literal English, or are you ready to actually communicate the subtext? Grammar is great. It gets you in the door, but nuance, tone, softening, and sarcasm are what actually build human relationships. I highly encourage you to go out today and actively listen for these hidden linguistic tools in your everyday conversations. What are people really saying to you? Thanks so much for joining me, and keep listening for the subtext.